The funeral director kept glancing at his watch, then at me, then at the rows of empty chairs behind us. Mrs. Hayes, he whispered, leaning close enough that I could smell his mint breath freshener. Perhaps we should wait a few more minutes. I'm sure your family is just running late. I looked at him with the calm that comes from absolute clarity. No one else is coming. Let's begin. His face registered shock, then pity, then professional composure. The kind of expression people wear when they witness something so fundamentally wrong that words fail them. He nodded slowly and moved to the front of the chapel, where my husband Thomas lay in his mahogany casket, surrounded by flowers I had chosen alone. 23 years of marriage, 3 children, 37 years of building a life together. And on this gray Tuesday morning in March, only one person sat in the pews to say goodbye. The service was supposed to start at 10 o'clock. At 9:45, I had still believed they would come. At 9:50, I told myself they were stuck in traffic. At 9:58, I accepted the truth that had been crystallizing in my chest like ice forming over a winter pond. My children had made their choice. The pastor began speaking about Thomas's life, his dedication to his family, his successful career as a civil engineer, his quiet kindness. Every word felt like it was being spoken in a foreign language. I heard the sounds but couldn't process the meaning because my mind was replaying the conversations from the past 3 days. Caroline, my eldest at 32, had called on Sunday evening. Mom, I know this is terrible timing, but Miranda's baby shower is on Tuesday. She's my best friend, and I'm the godmother. She scheduled it months ago before Dad got sick. I can't just not show up. Your father's funeral is Tuesday morning, I had said, my voice steady despite the disbelief flooding through me. The baby shower can't be rescheduled for later in the day? Mom, you're not being reasonable. Dad's gone. He won't know if I'm there or not, but Miranda will definitely notice if her godmother misses her shower. This is important to her. The betrayal in those words had stolen my breath, but I had simply said, I see, and ended the call. Marcus, my middle child at 29, had been even more direct. Look, Mom, I get that you're emotional right now, but Steven's 30th birthday brunch has been planned for weeks. All our college friends are flying in. I already bought my plane ticket to Austin. The funeral could have been scheduled for any day. Why did you pick Tuesday? Because that's when the funeral home had availability, I had explained, feeling my heart crack a little more. Your father died on Thursday. We needed to make arrangements quickly. Well, that's kind of inconsiderate, don't you think? You know I have a life too. Can't you just stream it or something so I can watch later? I had hung up without responding. Jessica, my youngest at 26, had at least pretended to feel conflicted. Mom, I'm so sorry, but I have a yoga retreat this weekend that extends through Tuesday. I paid $3,000 for it, and it's non-refundable. Plus, I really need this for my mental health. Dad's death has been so stressful for me. He would understand that I need to take care of myself. 3 children, 3 excuses, 0 presents at their father's funeral. As the pastor concluded his remarks and invited me to say a few words, I stood slowly, my black dress rustling in the silence of the nearly empty chapel. Behind me, the funeral director and 2 staff members sat in the back row out of courtesy. That was the entire audience for a man who had spent his life building homes, raising children, and being present for everyone who needed him. I walked to the podium and looked at Thomas's casket. We had chosen it together, actually, during those strange days after his cancer diagnosis, when we both knew the end was approaching but pretended we were just being practical. He had joked that he wanted something sturdy. If I'm going to be stuck in a box for eternity, it better be well constructed, he had said, making me laugh despite the tears. Thomas was a good man, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. He believed in family above everything else. He believed in showing up, even when it was inconvenient, especially when it was inconvenient. I paused, looking at the empty chairs where our children should have been sitting. He believed that love was demonstrated through action, not just words, that being present mattered, that some things, some moments were sacred and irreplaceable. The funeral director shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was wrong about one thing, though. He believed that the values we taught our children would stay with them, that the example we set would guide them even when we weren't there to remind them. I placed my hand on the podium, steadying myself. He died believing his children loved him. He died before he could learn the truth. The chapel was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Thank you for being here, I said to the nearly empty room, my words heavy with irony that only I could fully appreciate. Thomas would have been grateful for your presence, small as it is. I returned to my seat as the pastor announced the final hymn. The funeral director had arranged for recorded music since there was no one to sing. The melody echoed off the walls, emphasizing just how alone I was in this moment that should have been filled with family, with love, with shared grief. As they closed the casket for the final time, I walked forward and placed my hand on the polished wood. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry they didn't come. I'm sorry you believed better of them than they deserved. The burial was even more desolate. At the cemetery, rain had started falling, creating a fitting atmosphere for the loneliest goodbye imaginable. The workers lowered Thomas into the ground, while I stood under a black umbrella, watching the man I had loved for 3 decades disappear into the earth. I had purchased 2 plots, side by side, imagining a distant future when I would join him. Now I wondered if anyone would bother to attend my funeral either, or if I too would make this journey surrounded only by paid professionals. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. How did it go? Was it nice? Nice. She asked if her father's funeral was nice. I typed back, empty. Another buzz, this time from Marcus. Hope you're doing okay. Send pics of the flowers. Then Jessica. Thinking of you today, Mom. The yoga retreat is amazing. I can really feel Dad's spirit here in nature. I didn't respond to any of them. I simply put my phone away and walked to my car, leaving Thomas behind in the rain. The drive home took 30 minutes. I had lived in this house for 25 years, raised all 3 children here, celebrated countless holidays and birthdays within these walls. Now it felt like a mausoleum, filled with memories of a family that had apparently been an illusion. I walked inside, set my purse on the entry table, and stood in the silence of a mother who had just buried her husband, alone. The silence of a woman confronting the reality that the children she had sacrificed for, supported through every challenge, and loved unconditionally, couldn't be bothered to say goodbye to their father. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Thomas's study, surrounded by his books and his carefully organized files, and I made a decision. Actually, I made several decisions. Decisions about inheritance, decisions about family, decisions about consequences, because what my children didn't know, what they had been too self-absorbed to notice during Thomas's final months, was that he had left very specific instructions, and those instructions had included a clause that I now intended to execute with absolute precision. Tomorrow morning, our family lawyer would be visiting, and my children, who had found their father's funeral too inconvenient to attend, would discover exactly what their absence had cost them. I slept for maybe 2 hours that night, waking every time I reached for Thomas in the darkness and found empty space instead. By 6 in the morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with Thomas's will spread out before me, reading his words for the 10th time since the funeral. The document was dated 6 weeks before his death, updated from the original will we had made together 15 years ago. Thomas had asked me to leave the room when his lawyer came to finalize it. "Trust me, Eleanor," he had said, his voice weak but determined. "I need to protect you." At the time, I thought he was just being his usual thoughtful self, making sure I would be financially secure. Now, reading through the carefully worded clauses, I understood exactly what he had been protecting me from. My phone rang at 7:30. Caroline, using her cheerful voice that always meant she wanted something. "Good morning, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Like I buried my husband alone yesterday," I replied flatly. A pause. "Mom, please don't be dramatic. Miranda's baby shower was important. More important than your father's funeral. That's not fair. You know I wanted to be there, but life doesn't stop just because someone dies. Miranda would have been devastated if I missed it." I took a slow breath, remembering Thomas's advice during his final days. "Don't argue with them," he had said. "Just let them show you who they really are and believe them." "Is there something you needed, Caroline?" "Well, actually, yes. Richard and I have been talking, and we think we should probably discuss Dad's estate. Not that we're in any hurry or anything, but there's the house, his retirement accounts, the life insurance. We just want to make sure everything is handled properly. Richard and I, my son-in-law, who had convinced Caroline to move to Boston 5 years ago and rarely visited, we think, as if they were the decision makers in this situation. The lawyer is coming today at 9 to discuss everything," I said. "You're welcome to join us." "Today? Mom, that's so soon. Don't we need time to grieve first? I needed my family at my husband's funeral. That needed time that didn't happen either." Silence on the other end. Then, 9 o'clock, "I'll be there." The call ended abruptly. 2 minutes later, Marcus called. Word traveled fast among my children when it concerned money. "Mom, Caroline just told me you're meeting with the lawyer today. That seems really quick. Is everything okay?" "Everything is exactly as your father wanted it to be." "Right, but shouldn't we all be there? To make sure, everything is handled correctly? To make sure you get what you believe you're entitled to, you mean?" "That's harsh, Mom. I'm just looking out for the family." "Which family, Marcus? The one that attends funerals? Or the one that prioritizes birthday brunches?" "Jesus, are you going to hold that against me forever? Stephen's party was important to me, and your father's funeral wasn't. I understand perfectly. 9 o'clock, Marcus. Be here or don't. Either way, the reading will proceed." I hung up before he could respond. The anger that I had been suppressing since Sunday was finally starting to surface, hot and clarifying. Jessica called at 8:15, her voice still dreamy from what I assumed was morning meditation. "Mom, I just got off the phone with Caroline. She said you're doing the will reading today? That feels really sudden. Are you sure you're in the right headspace for this?" "My headspace is fine, Jessica. I buried your father yesterday. Today I'm handling his final wishes. I just think we should wait until everyone can be together, until we've all had time to process our grief." "Your grief? Tell me about your grief, Jessica. Did you grieve at your yoga retreat while your father was being lowered into the ground?" "Mom, that's not fair. I'm grieving in my own way. Not everyone processes death the same way. You're right. Some people process it by showing up. Others process it by making excuses. I'm driving up from the city now. I'll be there by 9. She hung up without saying goodbye, which was somehow fitting. At 8:45, I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Through the window, I watched my 3 children arrive within minutes of each other, as if they had coordinated. Caroline stepped out of her Lexus in a black pantsuit that probably cost more than the funeral service. Marcus emerged from his Tesla wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, clearly annoyed at having to cut short his birthday celebration. Jessica pulled up in her BMW, her yoga mat visible in the back seat, wearing flowing linen pants and a loose top that screamed, "Spiritual, but make it expensive." They had all done well for themselves, my children. Caroline was a marketing executive in Boston. Marcus ran a tech startup in Austin. Jessica was a lifestyle influencer in New York City, making money from posting pictures of her carefully curated life online. All of them successful. None of them present when it mattered most. I watched them gather on the front porch, talking among themselves before ringing the doorbell. Through the window, I could see their expressions. Concerned, slightly guilty, but mostly calculating. They were here for the will reading, not for me. When I opened the door, Caroline spoke first. Mom, we're so sorry about yesterday. We all feel terrible. Do you? I stepped aside to let them enter. How exactly does that feeling manifest? In regret? In shame? Or just in concern about inheritance? Marcus pushed past his sister. Can we not do this right now? Where's the lawyer? In Thomas's study, waiting. They filed past me, and I caught the scent of Caroline's expensive perfume, Marcus's cologne, Jessica's essential oils. All of them smelled like people who had places to be, things to do, lives too important to pause for something as mundane as a parent's funeral. Attorney Gerald Morrison stood as we entered the study. He was 72, had known Thomas for 30 years, and had been present at the funeral yesterday, one of only 4 people in attendance. Caroline, Marcus, Jessica. He greeted them with a nod that was professional but noticeably cool. Please, sit. They arranged themselves on the leather couch that Thomas had purchased 10 years ago, the one where he used to read every evening. I took the chair opposite them, and Gerald sat behind the desk. Before we begin, Gerald said, adjusting his glasses, I want to make something very clear. Your father updated this will 6 weeks before his death. He was of sound mind and body, and his instructions are legally binding. There will be no contest, no debate, no negotiation. Is that understood? The 3 of them exchanged glances. Caroline spoke first. Of course. We just want to honor Dad's wishes. Gerald opened the leather folder containing the will. Thomas Michael Hayes's last will and testament, dated January 15, 2025. He began reading the standard legal language, the declaration of sound mind, the revocation of previous wills. My children shifted impatiently, waiting for the part that mattered to them. To my wife, Eleanor Marie Hayes, I leave the following. Our home at 47 Maple Street, fully paid, with all contents. My retirement account from Thornton Engineering, currently valued at approximately $1.2 million. My life insurance policy, with a payout of $500,000. All vehicles, all personal possessions, and complete control over all financial assets. Caroline's expression relaxed slightly. Marcus nodded. Jessica smiled. They were doing the math, calculating how much remained for them to inherit after I died. Gerald continued. To my children, Caroline Elizabeth Hayes Morrison, Marcus Thomas Hayes, and Jessica Lynn Hayes, I leave the following inheritance contingent upon a single condition. The room went silent. Contingent was not a word any of them wanted to hear. Each child will receive $50,000 to be distributed immediately, if and only if they attended my funeral service. Time seemed to stop. I watched the color drain from Caroline's face, watched Marcus lean forward as if he hadn't heard correctly, watched Jessica's mouth fall open in shock. Wait, Marcus said. What? Gerald's voice remained steady and professional. The will explicitly states that attendance at Thomas's funeral service was the condition for receiving the inheritance. Those who attended received $50,000. Those who did not attend received nothing. That's insane, Caroline said, her voice rising. He can't do that. He absolutely can, Gerald replied. And he did. The will is legally sound, properly executed, and completely enforceable. Jessica stood up abruptly. There has to be a mistake. Dad wouldn't do this. He loved us. He did love you, I said quietly. That's why he was so disappointed. Mom, Marcus turned to me, his face reddening. Did you know about this? I knew that your father valued family. I knew that he believed showing up mattered. I knew that in his final days, he talked about how important it was to be present for the people you love. But you didn't tell us the funeral was a condition. Caroline's voice was nearly a shout now. If we had known there was money involved, obviously we would have come. The words hung in the air, revealing more than she had intended. Obviously, I repeated. Obviously you would have come if there was money involved, but not because it was your father's funeral. Not because it was the right thing to do, just because of money. That's not what I meant, Caroline backtracked, but the damage was done. Gerald cleared his throat. There's more. Thomas also included a letter to be read in the event that any of his children failed to attend the funeral. He pulled out a sealed envelope and broke the wax seal. Inside was Thomas's familiar handwriting, slightly shaky but still legible. To my children who chose not to attend my funeral, Gerald read aloud. If you're hearing this letter, it means you made a choice. You chose your convenience over my memory. You chose your plans over your family. You chose yourselves over saying goodbye to me. Jessica had started crying. Marcus was pale. Caroline sat frozen. I spent your entire lives teaching you about values, about priorities, about what it means to be family. The letter continued. I thought I had succeeded. I thought you understood that some moments are irreplaceable, that some responsibilities are non-negotiable, that love requires sacrifice. Gerald's voice remained steady, but I could hear the emotion beneath his professional tone. I was wrong, and so I'm leaving you one final lesson. The lesson that actions have consequences, that choices matter, that you cannot claim to love someone while treating them as optional. Dad, no, Jessica whispered. $50,000, the letter continued. That's what I'm leaving to each child who attended my funeral. Not because I'm trying to buy your presents, but because I wanted to see who would show up when there was nothing to gain, who would be there out of love alone, who would make the sacrifice even when it was inconvenient. The letter concluded, if you're hearing this, you failed that test, and the consequence is not just the loss of money, it's the knowledge that when it mattered most, you weren't there, that your father died knowing exactly where he ranked in your priorities. That is my final gift to you, the truth about yourselves. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Gerald seemed affected, carefully folding the letter and placing it back in its envelope. That's it? Marcus finally said. We get nothing? You get exactly what you earned, I replied. Nothing. Caroline understood abruptly. This is cruel. This is manipulative. He's punishing us from beyond the grave. He's teaching you from beyond the grave, I corrected. There's a difference. Mom, you can fight this, Jessica pleaded. You can override the will. You can give us our fair share. My fair share of what, Jessica? Of a marriage we built together? Of assets we accumulated over decades while raising you? Of a life insurance policy meant to take care of me now that I'm alone? We're your children. Yes, you are. And yesterday, when I needed you most, where were you? The days following the will reading were remarkably quiet. My children had left the house in various states of distress, anger, and disbelief, but none of them had stayed to comfort me. None of them had asked how I was managing alone in the house that suddenly felt too large and too empty. Caroline had stormed out first, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floors. "This is unconscionable," she had declared, her face flushed with anger. "Richard's lawyer will hear about this." Marcus had been more subdued but equally determined. "We'll contest this. No judge will uphold a will that's clearly meant to punish family members for making scheduling decisions." Jessica had simply cried, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her face. "How could you let him do this to us, Mom? How could you not warn us?" I had stood at the doorway and watched them leave, remembering every sacrifice Thomas and I had made for them over the years. The mortgage we had taken on their college educations, even though they all qualified for student loans. The down payment we had given Caroline for her first house. The seed money we had provided for Marcus's startup. The year we had supported Jessica while she found herself traveling through Europe. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Decades of putting their needs first. And they couldn't spare 4 hours for a funeral. That first week alone was the hardest. I would wake at 3 in the morning, forgetting for a moment that Thomas was gone, reaching for him in the darkness and finding only cold sheets. The house made different sounds at night when you were truly alone. Every creak, every settling board seemed amplified. I started going through Thomas's things methodically, one room at a time. His closet full of carefully pressed shirts and the cologne he had worn for 30 years. His desk drawers containing decades of receipts, notes, and small memories. A birthday card I had given him in 1995. A photo of the kids when they were still small enough to believe their parents were heroes. On the 8th day after the funeral, Caroline called. Her voice was different now, controlled and cold. "Mom, Richard's lawyer says we have grounds for a contest. Dad's will is clearly punitive and doesn't reflect his actual wishes." "It reflects his actual wishes perfectly," I replied, folding one of Thomas's sweaters and adding it to the donation box. "He spent weeks working on that will with Gerald. Every word was intentional. A will that disinherits children over missing one event? No court will see that as reasonable." "Then go to court, Caroline. Spend your money on lawyers. Spend your time fighting your dead father's last wishes. I'm sure that will help you sleep better at night. Don't pretend you're not benefiting from this. You got everything." "I got everything because I've been here. I was here when your father couldn't walk to the bathroom alone. I was here when he woke up screaming from the pain. I was here every single day and night of his illness while you three were busy with your very important lives. We visited." "You visited twice, Caroline? Twice in 6 months? You stayed for an hour each time and spent most of it checking your phone?" The line went quiet. "Then, we had responsibilities. So did I. I had a husband who was dying. That was my responsibility, and I didn't delegate it or postpone it or find someone else to handle it because it was inconvenient." She hung up without saying goodbye, and I wasn't surprised when Marcus called 30 minutes later with essentially the same message. They were going to fight the will. They had consulted lawyers. They believed they had a case. "Do what you need to do," I told him. "But understand something, Marcus. Every dollar you spend fighting this is a dollar you're taking from your own pocket, and you're doing it to override your father's explicit wishes. Is that really how you want to remember him? He's already gone, Mom. This is about what's fair to us." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I sat alone at his funeral? Is it fair that he spent his last weeks hoping his children would visit and they never came? Is it fair that he died believing you all loved your own lives more than you loved him?" Marcus had no response to that. The call ended shortly after. Jessica was the last to call, 3 days later. Her approach was different, more emotional, more manipulative. "Mom, I've been in therapy talking about all of this. My therapist says Dad's will was a form of emotional abuse. He was trying to control us even after death." I was sorting through photographs when she called, looking at pictures of Jessica as a little girl. Always dramatic, always the center of attention. "Your therapist wasn't at the funeral either, I assume?" "That's not fair." "No, Jessica. What's not fair is rewriting the narrative to make yourself the victim. Your father didn't abuse you. He held you accountable. There's a difference. I had a non-refundable yoga retreat. I told you that. And I had a non-refundable husband who died. One of those things was more important than the other. You chose poorly. So that's it? You're just going to let him destroy our family over one mistake?" I looked at the photograph in my hand. Jessica at age 7, sitting on Thomas's shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing. "He didn't destroy the family, sweetheart. The family destroyed itself. He just made sure there were consequences." 2 weeks after the funeral, Gerald called to tell me that all 3 children had officially filed to contest the will. "I expected this," he said. "Thomas expected it too. That's why he was so thorough in documenting his reasoning." "Will it go to court?" "Almost certainly. But Eleanor, I want you to understand something. This process will be ugly. They're going to argue that Thomas was not of sound mind. They're going to claim you manipulated him. They're going to try to paint you as the villain in this story. Let them try. I know the truth. The truth doesn't always win in court. You should be prepared for that possibility." But I wasn't worried about court. I was thinking about something else Thomas had told me during his final days, something I hadn't fully understood until now. They need to learn this lesson, Eleanor, he had said, his voice weak but determined. Not because I want to hurt them, but because if they don't learn it now, they'll never understand what really matters in life. They'll keep prioritizing the wrong things, keep missing the important moments, keep taking the people who love them for granted. But what if they never forgive us? I had asked. Then we'll know we raised them wrong, and at least we tried to fix it at the end. Now, sitting in our empty house, I understood what he meant. This wasn't about money. It had never been about money. It was about forcing our children to confront the consequences of their choices, to understand that love required action, not just words. The legal process moved slowly. Depositions were scheduled, evidence was gathered. Gerald prepared our defense carefully, documenting every visit the children had made during Thomas's illness, every excuse they had given for not coming more often, every phone call that had been cut short because they were busy. The picture that emerged was damning. Over 6 months of terminal illness, Caroline had visited twice for a total of 3 hours. Marcus had come once, staying for 90 minutes. Jessica had FaceTimed 4 times, always from somewhere exotic, always cutting the calls short because she had an appointment. Meanwhile, I had been there every single day. I had learned to change IVs, to manage pain medications, to help him to the bathroom at 3 in the morning when he was too weak to walk alone. I had held his hand through the worst of it, had whispered comfort when the pain became unbearable, had been the last face he saw before he closed his eyes forever. The contrast was stark, and Gerald made sure the judge would see it clearly. 3 months after the funeral, the first hearing was scheduled. I arrived at the courthouse early, wearing a simple black dress, no jewelry except my wedding ring. My children arrived together, a united front, all of them dressed expensively, all of them looking determined. Inside the courtroom, they sat on one side with their lawyers. I sat on the other with Gerald. We were separated by 12 feet of space that might as well have been miles. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Morrison. She reviewed the documents carefully before looking up at all of us. "This is an unusual case," she began. "A father conditioning inheritance on attendance at his funeral. It's certainly not something I've seen before." Caroline's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this will is clearly punitive and doesn't reflect Thomas Hayes's true intentions toward his children. It was created during a time of significant emotional distress and possibly under the influence of pain medications that could have affected his judgment." Gerald stood in response. "Your Honor, Thomas Hayes was evaluated by 2 separate physicians during the period he updated his will. Both confirmed he was of completely sound mind. Furthermore, he spent weeks working on the language with me, making sure every clause reflected exactly what he wanted." The judge nodded. "I've reviewed those medical evaluations. They're quite clear. Mr. Hayes was mentally competent." She looked at Caroline, Marcus, and Jessica. "I'd like to hear from the children. Why didn't you attend your father's funeral?" Caroline stood first, her voice composed but emotional. "Your Honor, I had a commitment as godmother to my best friend's baby shower. It had been planned for months, and I couldn't simply abandon her during such an important moment in her life. My father's funeral was scheduled with very short notice, making it impossible to rearrange my prior obligations." The judge's expression remained neutral. "You're a marketing executive in Boston, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you work Tuesdays?" Caroline hesitated. "I do." "So if your employer had scheduled an important meeting for that Tuesday, would you have attended the meeting or your friend's baby shower?" The question hung in the air. Caroline's face flushed. "That's different." "Is it? Help me understand how a work meeting would be more important than a baby shower, but a baby shower is more important than your father's funeral." Caroline sat down without answering. Marcus stood next. "Your Honor, I had already made plans for my best friend's 30th birthday in Austin. All of our college friends had arranged their schedules, bought plane tickets. I couldn't just cancel on everyone at the last minute." "But you could cancel on your father's funeral." "I thought there would be other opportunities to honor his memory. I didn't realize the funeral would be the only chance." "The only chance to see your father buried? When did you think the next opportunity would be?" Marcus had no response. Jessica stood, tears already flowing. "Your Honor, I was on a yoga retreat that I had paid $3,000 for. It was non-refundable, and I needed it for my mental health. My father's death was extremely traumatic for me." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Ms. Hayes, I've reviewed the evidence submitted by your mother's attorney. According to phone records and visiting logs, you FaceTimed with your father 4 times during his 6-month illness, for an average of 12 minutes per call. Is that accurate?" Jessica's tears continued. "I was dealing with a lot of personal issues." "I'm sure you were, but I'm trying to understand why a $3,000 yoga retreat was non-negotiable, but your father's funeral was." No one had an answer for that either. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Gerald presented documentation of every visit, every excuse, every time my children had prioritized something else over their dying father. He showed text messages, phone records, even social media posts from the day of the funeral. Caroline at the baby shower, Marcus at the birthday brunch, Jessica doing yoga on a beach. By the end, even my children's lawyers looked uncomfortable. Judge Morrison closed her folder and looked at all of us. "I'm going to take this under advisement and issue a ruling within 30 days, but I want to say something first." She looked directly at Caroline, Marcus, and Jessica. "I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen countless family disputes over inheritance. Most of them are about money, pure and simple. People fighting over who gets what, who deserves more, who was loved best." She paused. "This case is different. This isn't about a father being cruel or punitive. This is about a father who, in his final act, tried to teach his children a lesson about priorities, about what really matters, about the difference between love as a word and love as an action. Caroline started to object, but the judge held up her hand. I'm not finished. You three were raised by parents who, according to the evidence, sacrificed significantly for your educations, your careers, your happiness. They attended your games, your graduations, your weddings. They were present for your lives. She looked at me. And when your father needed you, when he was dying, when every day might have been his last, you were busy. You had other commitments. You had non-refundable plans. You had important events that couldn't be missed. Her voice hardened. And then, when he died, when your mother sat alone in a funeral home saying goodbye to the man she had loved for 38 years, you were at parties. You were celebrating. You were living your lives as if nothing had happened. Jessica was sobbing now. Marcus looked pale. Caroline's jaw was clenched. Your father didn't disinherit you to be cruel. He disinherited you to be clear, to make sure you understood, in the most concrete way possible, that your choices had consequences, that you can't claim to love someone while treating them as optional. That family isn't just a word you use when it's convenient. Judge Morrison closed her folder. Ruling in 30 days, court is adjourned. As we filed out of the courtroom, none of my children looked at me. They left together, probably to strategize their next move, to plan their appeal if the ruling went against them. I walked to my car alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was thinking about Thomas, about how proud he would be that his final lesson was being heard, even if it wasn't being learned. The 30 days of waiting felt longer than the 6 months of Thomas's illness. I filled the time by continuing to sort through our life together, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Every drawer opened, every box sorted, every photograph examined brought back memories that were both precious and painful. I found a journal Thomas had kept during his final months. I hadn't known about it. He must have written in it during the hours when I was asleep or running errands. The handwriting deteriorated as the illness progressed, but the message remained clear. March 2nd, one entry read, Eleanor asked the kids to visit this weekend. Caroline said she has a marketing conference. Marcus said he's launching a new product and can't leave Austin. Jessica said she's shooting content for her Instagram in Miami. I pretended to understand, but the truth is, I'm dying and they're busy. When did I become less important than a conference, a product launch, a photo shoot? Another entry, dated March 18th. Had the conversation with Gerald today about the will. Eleanor doesn't know the details yet. She'll think I'm being harsh, but I'm being honest. I need them to understand what they've done, not to punish them, but to wake them up. If they can't show up when I'm dying, when will they ever show up for anything that matters? The final entry was dated April 2nd, 5 days before he died. Today I realized I'm not angry at them anymore. I'm just sad. Sad that we somehow raise children who measure their time in terms of convenience rather than love. Sad that they'll have to live with this choice for the rest of their lives. Sad that Eleanor will be alone at my funeral. But maybe this is the lesson they needed. Maybe this pain will teach them something that my presence never could. I closed the journal and wept, not just for Thomas, but for the family we had believed we were building all those years. Every birthday party, every school play, every late-night conversation about homework or heartbreak. We had thought we were teaching them values. Instead, somewhere along the way, we had raised strangers who looked like our children, but didn't share our understanding of what family meant. 3 weeks after the hearing, Gerald called. The judge wants to see everyone in chambers. Not a formal hearing, just a conversation. She's asking that you all come without lawyers. What does that mean? It means she's made her decision, but she wants to talk to you first. All of you. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I arrived early again, sitting in the waiting area outside Judge Morrison's chambers, my hands folded in my lap. My children arrived together, as they always did now, united in their opposition to me, if nothing else. We were called in together. Judge Morrison's chambers were lined with law books and family photographs. She was sitting behind her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing papers. Sit, please, she said without looking up. We arranged ourselves in the chairs facing her desk, me on one end, my 3 children on the other. Empty space between us that felt symbolic. Finally, she removed her glasses and looked at us. I've made my ruling. The will stands. Thomas Hayes was of sound mind. His intentions were clear, and there's no legal basis to overturn his wishes. Caroline, Marcus, and Jessica, you will receive nothing from your father's estate. The shock on their faces was immediate, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. However, that's not why I asked you here. I wanted to talk to you, off the record, as a person, not just as a judge. She stood and walked around her desk, leaning against it to face us more directly. I lost my father 15 years ago. Cancer, like your dad. And I remember very clearly the day he died, because I was there. I had a trial scheduled that day, a big case that I'd been working on for months, but when the hospital called and said it was time, I walked out of that courtroom. I let my colleague take over. I drove to the hospital, and I held my father's hand while he died. Her voice was calm but intense. You know what that trial was about? Some company suing another company over a contract dispute. Money. Business. Important, sure, but forgettable. I can't even remember the outcome now, but I remember every second of my father's last hour. I remember what he said to me. I remember the sound of his breathing. I remember the moment he squeezed my hand one final time. She looked at each of my children in turn. That's the difference between what matters and what doesn't, between what you'll remember in 15 years and what you'll forget in 15 days. Your father tried to teach you that. Your mother has been trying to teach you that, and you still don't understand. Caroline's voice was tight. With all due respect, Your Honor, you don't know our circumstances. I know you chose a baby shower over a funeral. I know you chose a birthday party over saying goodbye. I know you chose yoga over your father's burial. Those aren't circumstances. Those are choices. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The funeral was scheduled quickly. We had prior commitments. Life is what happens while you're making other plans, Judge Morrison said. Your father's death wasn't scheduled. It wasn't convenient, but it was final, and you missed it. She walked back to her desk and pulled out a folder. Before I sign this final ruling, I want to read you something. It's from a letter your father wrote to me during the will preparation process. He asked me to read it only if the will was contested. She opened the folder and began reading in Thomas's own words. Judge Morrison, if you're reading this, it means my children have chosen to fight my last wishes. It means they value money more than understanding why I made this decision. It means the lesson is even more necessary than I feared. Jessica's tears started again, but silently this time. I don't want my children to remember me as the father who took away their inheritance. I want them to remember me as the father who loved them enough to try, one final time, to teach them what matters. If they contest this will, they're proving they haven't learned. If they accept it, maybe there's hope they're beginning to understand. The letter continued. Eleanor will be fine financially. This was never about taking care of her at their expense. This was about making sure they understand that love requires presence, that family means sacrifice, that some moments cannot be replaced or rescheduled or attended via video call. Judge Morrison paused, looking up at us. He concludes with this. I hope they'll forgive me someday. But more than that, I hope they'll understand me. I hope they'll look at their own lives and their own relationships and their own priorities and make better choices than they made with me. That would be worth more than any inheritance I could leave them. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Caroline, usually so composed, had tears streaming down her face. Marcus was staring at his hands. Jessica was openly sobbing. I'm signing the final ruling today, Judge Morrison said. The will stands, and this matter is closed. But I want you three to understand something. You can appeal this decision. You can take it to a higher court. You can spend years fighting over the money. She looked at each of them. But you can't get back the day of his funeral. You can't undo your absence. You can't change the fact that your mother sat alone in that chapel saying goodbye to the man who gave you life. That's already written. That's already done. She picked up her pen. The question now is what you do next. Do you keep fighting? Do you keep prioritizing money over meaning? Or do you accept what your father was trying to teach you and try to be better? No one spoke. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of us. You're dismissed, Judge Morrison said finally. Except you, Eleanor. I'd like a word. My children filed out silently. Through the window, I watched them walk to their cars, not together this time, but separately, each lost in their own thoughts. How are you holding up? The judge asked once we were alone. I don't know, I admitted. Some days I'm angry at them. Some days I'm just sad. Some days I miss Thomas so much I can barely breathe. She nodded. My mother died 3 years after my father. And you know what I regretted most? Not the big things, the small things. The Sunday dinners I missed because I was working. The phone calls I cut short because I was busy. The times I said, I'll visit next month, and then didn't. She looked at me directly. Your children will live with this choice for the rest of their lives. That's a heavier burden than losing an inheritance. And maybe, eventually, that burden will teach them what your husband was trying to teach them. And if it doesn't, then you'll know you did everything you could. Thomas did everything he could. Sometimes people have to learn lessons the hard way. Sometimes they don't learn at all. But that's not your failure. That's theirs. I drove home slowly, thinking about everything that had been said. The house was dark when I arrived, as it always was now. No one to turn on the porch light and welcome. No one to ask about my day. Just silence and memories. That evening, I received 3 text messages within an hour of each other. Caroline, Mom, can we talk? Marcus, I need to see you, please. Jessica, can I come over tomorrow? I have something to say. I stared at the messages for a long time, remembering Thomas's words from his journal. Not to punish them, but to wake them up. Maybe finally they were waking up. I responded to each of them with the same message. Sunday dinner, 6 o'clock. Be here or don't. Then I turned off my phone and sat in Thomas's study, surrounded by his books and his memories, and waited to see if this time they would choose differently. Sunday arrived with unexpected sunshine. I spent the morning cooking, preparing the dishes that had once been family favorites. Thomas's favorite pot roast, the garlic mashed potatoes Caroline had loved as a child, the honey glazed carrots Marcus used to request for every birthday, Jessica's preferred Caesar salad with homemade dressing. I wasn't sure why I was making this effort. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was hope, maybe it was one final test to see if they had learned anything at all. At 5:45, I heard the first car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Jessica getting out, carrying something wrapped in paper. She looked thinner than at the courthouse, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. She stood by her car for a moment, staring at the house as if gathering courage, before finally walking to the door. I opened it before she could knock. Mom, she said, her voice small. Thank you for letting me come. Dinner's at 6. You're early. I wanted to talk to you before the others arrived, if that's okay. I stepped aside, letting her in. She set the wrapped package on the entry table and followed me to the kitchen, where I was checking the roast. We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet bubbling of food cooking. I've been in therapy, Jessica finally said. Real therapy this time. Not just someone telling me what I want to hear. We've been talking about Dad's funeral, about the will, about everything. I didn't respond, just continued basting the roast. My therapist asked me to write a letter to Dad, to say everything I wished I'd said when he was alive, and when I tried to write it, I realized I didn't know what to say, because the truth is, I didn't really know him. Not as an adult. I knew him as the dad who paid for things and showed up when I needed wanted something, but I didn't know him as a person. She paused, her voice breaking, and now I never will, because I was too busy taking yoga selfies to visit him when he was dying, too busy building my brand to care that he was losing his life. I turned to face her. Her makeup was smudged from crying. Her expensive clothes looked slept in, and for the first time in years, she looked like my daughter instead of the carefully curated image she presented to the world. Why didn't you come, Jessica? Really, not the excuse about the yoga retreat, the real reason. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the same chair she'd sat in as a little girl doing homework while I cooked dinner, because I was scared, because seeing him dying made it real, and I didn't want it to be real, because it was easier to be somewhere beautiful, doing something peaceful, pretending everything was fine. So, you chose comfort over courage. Yes. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I'll regret that choice for the rest of my life. The yoga retreat ended 3 days after the funeral. I can't remember a single pose I did, a single meditation I attended, but I remember checking my phone and seeing the notification that you'd posted about the funeral, and I remember feeling relieved that I didn't have to see him in a casket, that I didn't have to face the reality that he was gone. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, I saw Marcus approaching, carrying a bouquet of flowers. Yellow roses, my favorite. How did he remember that when he'd forgotten his father's funeral? Jessica stood quickly. The package I brought. It's for you. From Dad, in a way. I'll explain later. Marcus knocked tentatively, then entered when I called out. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Mom, he held out the flowers awkwardly. These are for you. I don't know if flowers make up for anything, but I saw them and thought of you. They don't make up for anything, I said, taking them anyway. But thank you. He nodded, setting down a canvas bag. I brought something too. Can I put it in the living room? Before I could answer, Caroline's Lexus pulled into the driveway. She sat in the car for a full minute before getting out, and when she did, I noticed she looked different. Her hair was pulled back simply, her clothes were casual, and she wasn't wearing the armor of expensive jewelry she usually hid behind. She came in without knocking, as she had when she lived here, and stopped when she saw Marcus and Jessica already in the kitchen. You both came, she said, surprised. Mom said dinner at 6, Marcus replied. We came. The three of them stood in the kitchen, looking at each other, at me, at the table set for 4. The awkwardness was palpable, years of distance and recent betrayal creating a wall between us that food couldn't bridge. Sit, I said finally. Dinner's ready. We moved to the dining room where I'd set the table with the good china, the set Thomas and I had received as a wedding gift 38 years ago. I served the food in silence, and they accepted their plates without comment. For several minutes, no one spoke. The only sounds were silverware against china, and the old house settling around us. Caroline broke the silence first. Mom, I want to apologize. For what specifically? I asked. There's so much to apologize for. I'd like to know what you think requires an apology. She flinched but continued. For missing Dad's funeral, for prioritizing Miranda's baby shower over saying goodbye to my father, for convincing myself that it was okay because Dad was gone and wouldn't know the difference. But I would know the difference. I did know the difference. Yes, she set down her fork, and I'm sorry for that too. Sorry that you had to sit alone at his funeral. Sorry that when you needed your family, we weren't there. Sorry that we made excuses instead of sacrifices. Marcus spoke next. I've been thinking about something Dad used to say. Show up, especially when it's hard. He said it when I didn't want to go to Jessica's dance recitals. He said it when Caroline complained about coming home for holidays. He said it all the time, and I never really understood what he meant. Do you understand now? I asked. I'm beginning to. He looked down at his plate. Steven's birthday party, the one I chose over the funeral, was fun. We had a great time, but it's over now, and I can barely remember details about it. It already feels like something that happened years ago instead of months ago. But Dad's funeral, the one I missed, I think about that every single day. Jessica wiped her eyes with her napkin. I told myself Dad would understand about the yoga retreat, that he'd want me to take care of my mental health. But the truth is, Dad would have been disappointed. He would have wanted me to be there, to face the hard thing, to grow up. He was disappointed, I said quietly. He told me so. He said he'd hoped that by the time you all reached adulthood, you'd understand what really mattered. He was wrong. The words hung heavy in the air. Caroline's tears started then. Real tears that ruined her makeup and made her look younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. The judge read Dad's letter, she said. The one about hoping we'd forgive him. But he's not the one who needs forgiving, is he? No, I agreed. He's not. Can you forgive us? Jessica asked. I know we don't deserve it, but can you? I looked at my 3 children, all of them crying now, all of them finally confronting what they'd done. And I thought about Thomas's journal, his hope that this pain would teach them something. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. Forgiveness isn't something I can just decide to give because you've asked for it. It's something that has to grow from seeing real change, from understanding that you truly comprehend what you did wrong. We do understand, Marcus insisted. We know we made a terrible choice. Do you? Or do you just understand that there were consequences for that choice? Because those are different things. Caroline looked stricken. What do you mean? I mean that understanding you lost money is different from understanding you missed an irreplaceable moment. That regretting the financial consequences is different from regretting the absence itself. That being sorry you got caught is different from being sorry for what you did. I stood and walked to the sideboard, opening the drawer where I'd placed Jessica's wrapped package. Jessica brought something today. Should we open it? She nodded, and I carefully unwrapped the paper. Inside was a photo album, old and worn. I recognized it immediately as one of Thomas's, from before digital cameras, when every photo video was printed and precious. I found it in my storage unit, Jessica explained. Dad gave it to me when I moved to New York. He said it was photos of our family, of all the times we'd been together when we were kids. He wanted me to have it so I'd remember where I came from. I opened the album. The first page showed a birthday party, Jessica's 5th. Thomas was kneeling beside her, helping her blow out candles. The next page was Caroline's college graduation, Thomas and I flanking her, all of us beaming with pride. Then Marcus's baseball game, Thomas in the stands, camera raised, capturing every moment. Page after page of Thomas showing up, Thomas being present, Thomas making time for his children even when it was inconvenient, even when he was tired, even when he had other things to do. I looked through this album 3 days ago, Jessica said. Really looked at it, and I realized that Dad was in every single important moment of my life. Every birthday, every graduation, every milestone. He was always there, and we couldn't be there for one day, Marcus finished quietly. For the most important day. I closed the album carefully. Your father made a video before he died. Did you know that? They shook their heads. He recorded it a week before he passed. He was very weak, could barely speak above a whisper, but he wanted to leave you each a message. Caroline looked up sharply. He did? Gerald has the videos. He was supposed to give them to you after the will reading, but with the court case, he held on to them. I called him yesterday and asked him to send them to me. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, where 3 video files waited. Should I play them? The 3 of them exchanged glances, fear and hope mixing on their faces. Finally, they nodded. I played Caroline's first. Thomas appeared on screen, sitting in his wheelchair in the study, wearing his favorite cardigan. He looked thin and tired, but his eyes were clear. Caroline, his voice came through the speaker, weak but steady. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if Gerald gave this to you, it means you came to my funeral. It means you chose to be there. Even though it was hard, even though it was sad, even though you had 1,000 other things you could have been doing, Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. I want you to know how proud I am of you, not for your career, not for your achievements, though those are impressive, but for showing up, for understanding that some moments matter more than others, for choosing family when it counted. That's the kind of person I raised, and I'm grateful that's the kind of person you became. The video ended. Caroline was sobbing now, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. But I didn't go. I didn't show up. He thought I would, and I didn't. I played Marcus's video next. Thomas in the same setting, the same tired but hopeful expression. Marcus, my boy, you always were the most logical of my children, always looking for the rational explanation, the practical solution. So here's a practical truth. Time is the only thing we can't make more of. You can make more money, find more friends, create more opportunities, but you can't make more time with the people you love. Marcus was crying silently, tears streaming down his face. If you're watching this, it means you understood that truth. It means you chose to spend your time, your most valuable resource, saying goodbye to me, and that means everything. I love you, son. I'm proud of the man you've become. Jessica's video was last. Thomas looked even more tired in this one, as if recording these messages had taken everything he had left. Jessica, my sweet girl, you've always been so full of life, always chasing the next adventure, the next experience, the next beautiful moment. That's a gift. But remember that some of the most beautiful moments aren't Instagram perfect. Some of them are hard and sad and painful, and those moments matter just as much, maybe more, than the pretty ones. Jessica was shaking, her hand covering her mouth. If you're watching this, it means you came to my funeral. It means you chose a hard moment over an easy one. It means you've learned that real life, the kind worth living, includes both the sunrises and the sunsets, the joy and the grief. I'm so proud of you for that courage. I love you, sweetheart. Always. The video ended. My 3 children sat at the table, devastated by the messages they had never been meant to see because they had failed the test. Thomas had recorded these videos believing they would come, believing they would choose correctly, believing in them, and they had proven him wrong. The silence after the videos ended was absolute. My 3 children sat frozen, confronting the reality that their father had died believing better of them than they deserved. He had recorded those messages thinking they would show up, thinking they would make the right choice, thinking they were the people he had raised them to be. Caroline was the first to speak, her voice barely audible. He died disappointed in us. Yes, I said simply. There was no point in softening the truth anymore. We can't fix this, Marcus said, his voice hollow. We can never fix this. We can't go back and make a different choice. No, you can't. Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need air. She walked to the back door and stepped out onto the porch, and after a moment, Caroline and Marcus followed her. I stayed at the table, looking at the half-eaten food, the good china, the photos in the album still open in front of me. Through the window, I could see my 3 children standing together in the backyard where they had played as kids, where Thomas had taught them to throw a baseball and ride bikes and appreciate the stars on clear nights. They were talking, gesturing, Caroline's shoulders shaking with sobs. This was their moment to process, their moment to face what they had done. I couldn't do that work for them. 20 minutes passed before they came back inside. They had clearly come to some kind of agreement because they moved as a unit, sitting back at the table with a new sense of purpose. Caroline spoke first, her voice steadier now despite her red eyes. Mom, we know we can't change what we did. We know we can never get that day back, but we want to try to be better. We want to try to become the people Dad thought we were. What does that look like? I asked. Marcus leaned forward. I've been thinking about something Dad used to say. That family isn't just the people you're related to, it's the people who show up. I haven't been showing up, Mom, not just for the funeral, but for years. I moved to Austin and convinced myself that distance was an excuse for for absence. I've been doing the same thing in Boston, Caroline added. Building my life, my career, my social circle, and treating visits home as obligations instead of opportunities. Even when Dad was sick, I told myself you had everything under control, that I didn't need to be here. And I've been the worst, Jessica said quietly. I built an entire life around appearances, around making everything look perfect and beautiful and effortless. And I was so busy curating my image that I forgot to actually live, forgot to be present for the real, messy, difficult parts of life. I listened, trying to determine if this was genuine insight or another performance. They had always been good at telling me what I wanted to hear. Words are easy, I said. Your father knew that. That's why he didn't leave you a letter asking for change. He left you consequences. What are you actually going to do differently? They exchanged glances again, and Marcus pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. We talked outside. We made a list of commitments, not promises because we know promises don't mean anything without action, but commitments we're making to ourselves and to you. He unfolded the paper and read, I, Marcus Hayes, commit to visiting at least once a month, not for an hour, for a whole weekend, and not when it's convenient, but regularly, regardless of what else is happening in my life. Caroline took the paper. I, Caroline Hayes Morrison, commit to weekly video calls, real calls, not quick check-ins while I'm multitasking, and I commit to being honest about my life instead of pretending everything is perfect. Jessica read last. I, Jessica Hayes, commit to being present instead of performative, to showing up when things are hard, not just when they're Instagram-worthy, and to rebuilding a relationship with my mother based on authenticity, not convenience. They all looked at me, waiting for my response. Those are good commitments, I said carefully, but they're easy to make and hard to keep, especially when life gets busy again, when work demands attention, when other priorities emerge. We know, Caroline said. That's why we want to start now, tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. What do you mean? Marcus stood and walked to the living room, returning with the canvas bag he'd brought. I took 2 weeks off work. I'm staying here with you to help sort through Dad's things, to handle whatever needs handling, to just be here. Caroline pulled out her phone. I canceled 3 meetings this week. I'm staying through Wednesday. Richard will manage things at home. This is more important. Jessica gestured to her suitcase by the door, which I hadn't noticed before. I subletted my apartment for 3 months. I'm moving back home temporarily, if you'll have me. I want to learn how to be part of a family again instead of just visiting when it suits me. I stared at them, searching their faces for signs of manipulation or performance. But what I saw was genuine fear, genuine hope, genuine desire to change. Why now? I asked. Why not during the 6 months your father was dying? Why not when he was asking for visits and you were all too busy? The question hit its mark. All 3 of them flinched. Because we didn't understand then, Caroline admitted. We thought we had time. We thought there would always be another chance. We were wrong. Because we were selfish, Marcus added, and we thought our wants mattered more than his needs. We were wrong about that too. Because I was a coward, Jessica finished, and I ran away from pain instead of facing it. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. I looked at each of them, these 3 people I had raised, who had disappointed me so profoundly, who were now asking for a chance to prove they could change. Your father's videos, I said slowly. He made a 4th one for me. Their attention sharpened. He told me that if they didn't come to the funeral, if they failed this final test, that I needed to decide something. Could I accept them back into my life if they eventually understood what they'd done? Or would I hold this against them forever? What did he say you should do? Caroline asked. He said that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about accepting that people are imperfect and giving them room to grow. He said that if they came to understand their mistake, if they genuinely tried to change, that I should let them try. But that I should also protect myself, that I shouldn't accept words without actions or promises without follow-through. I stood and walked to the mantel, where Thomas's urn sat surrounded by photos. I touched it gently, drawing strength from the man who had loved me for 38 years. So here's what I'll offer you, I said, turning back to face them. 3 months. Marcus, you say you took 2 weeks off. Extend it to 3 months if you can. Caroline, cancel more than 3 meetings. Make it clear to Richard and your job that family is your priority right now. Jessica, living here is a start, but it needs to be more than just residence. It needs to be participation. We can do that, Marcus said immediately. I'm not finished. During these 3 months, we rebuild. We learn how to be a family again. We're honest about our feelings, about our disappointments, about our failures. No more pretending everything is fine. No more surface-level relationships. Okay, Caroline agreed. And at the end of 3 months, we evaluate. If I see genuine change, if I see you actually showing up and being present, then we continue. We build something new. But if I see the same patterns, the same excuses, the same selfishness, then we're done. Permanently. No more chances, no more second guessing. I will move on with my life without you in it. The ultimatum hung in the air. It was harsh, but it was honest. And after everything that had happened, honesty was all I had left to offer. We understand, Jessica said, and we accept. Then we start tomorrow. Tonight, you can stay. Marcus, take your old room. Caroline, the guest room is yours. Jessica, your room hasn't changed. They nodded, relief evident on their faces. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of my children moving around the house, water running, doors opening and closing, quiet conversations in the hallway. The house felt alive again in a way it hadn't since Thomas died. In a way it hadn't felt in years, really, since my children had all moved away and started their adult lives. But I wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy. 3 months of proximity would reveal whether their remorse was genuine or whether they were were just performing contrition to ease their guilt. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. In the kitchen, I found all 3 of my children already awake, working together to make breakfast. Marcus was scrambling eggs. Caroline was setting the table. Jessica was slicing fruit. "Good morning, Mom," Caroline said. "We thought we'd make breakfast together, like we used to on Sundays when we were kids." I poured myself coffee and watched them work. They were trying. That much was clear. But trying and succeeding were different things. Over breakfast, Marcus pulled out a calendar. "I've been thinking about how to organize Dad's things. We should probably start with his office, then move to the garage, then tackle the storage unit. We could do 1 room per week," Caroline suggested. "That way we're not rushing, and we can take time to remember and process." "I'd like to create something with his photos," Jessica added. "Not for social media, for us, a proper family album that we can all share." They were planning, they were engaged, they were present, but I remembered Thomas's words from his journal. Actions over time, not promises in moments of guilt. 3 months would tell the story. 3 months would reveal whether my children had truly learned the lesson their father had tried to teach them, or whether this was just another performance, another excuse, another way of avoiding the real work of change. For now, I would give them the chance. For Thomas, who had believed in second chances even when they hurt. For myself, because I needed to know if reconciliation was possible. And for them, because despite everything, they were still my children. But I would not be fooled again. I would not accept words without actions. And I would not sacrifice my own peace for their convenience. The next 3 months would determine whether we had a future as a family, or whether Thomas's funeral had been not just goodbye to him, but goodbye to us as well. Epilogo: 6 months have passed since that Sunday dinner. The 3-month trial period extended naturally into 6 because real change, I learned, doesn't happen on a schedule. It happens in moments accumulated over time. Marcus did extend his leave, ultimately taking a full 3 months away from Austin. He's back there now, but he kept his commitment. He visits every month, flying in on Friday afternoons and leaving on Sunday evenings. Last month, he brought Stephen, the friend whose birthday he had prioritized over the funeral. Stephen apologized to me directly, saying he had never known the circumstances, and that if he had, he would have insisted Marcus attend the funeral instead. Caroline reduced her work hours and had a difficult conversation with Richard about their priorities. Their marriage is in therapy now, not because it was failing, but because they both realized they had been living parallel lives instead of a shared one. She comes home every other weekend, and during the weeks between, we video call 3 times. Real calls where she talks about her struggles and fears, not just her successes. Jessica still lives here. Her 3-month sublet became 6 months, and then she simply didn't renew her New York lease. She's building a different kind of presence online now, one focused on grief, healing, and the messy reality of rebuilding family relationships. Her follower count has actually grown, but more importantly, she seems more grounded, more real, more like the daughter I remember from before she became a brand. We spread some of Thomas's ashes in the garden he loved. Each of us said something, and this time, all of us were present. Caroline talked about the times he taught her to be strong. Marcus shared memories of building things together. Jessica read a poem she'd written about forgiveness and second chances. I spoke about the man who had loved us all enough to hold us accountable, the inheritance money. The $1.2 million in Thomas's retirement account remains untouched in my name. I don't need it. My needs are modest, and Thomas's life insurance provided more than enough. Sometimes I think about what I'll do with it eventually, but I've made no decisions yet. What I have decided is that if my children continue on this path, if they continue showing up and being present, then perhaps someday that money will go to them after all. Not because they're entitled to it, but because they will have earned it through the harder currency of time, attention, and love. But that's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. They could slip back into old patterns. They could decide that this work is too hard, that maintaining these relationships requires more effort than they're willing to give. If that happens, the money will go to charity, to organizations that help people learn to show up for each other, to be present, to understand that love is a verb, not just a feeling. Last week, we had a family dinner, all of us together, cooking and talking and remembering. At one point, Marcus said something that made us all laugh, and for just a moment, I forgot about the funeral, about the betrayal, about the pain. Just for a moment, we were simply a family. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not the erasure of what happened, but the slow, difficult work of building something new on top of the ruins. Not forgetting, but learning to remember without drowning in the pain. Thomas was right about so many things. Right that consequences teach better than lectures. Right that love requires action. Right that family isn't just about blood, but about showing up, especially when it's hard. He was also right that people can change, if they want to badly enough, if they're willing to do the work, if they understand that some lessons are worth the pain they cost. My children missed their father's funeral. That's a fact that will never change. They chose parties and yoga and showers over saying goodbye. That's written in permanent ink. But they also came back. They also tried. They also learned slowly and painfully what their father had been trying to teach them all along. And I learned that forgiveness isn't about absolving people of their mistakes. It's about acknowledging that people are more than their worst moments, that growth is possible, and that love, real love, survives even the deepest wounds if you're willing to tend them carefully. Thomas's funeral had an empty room, but his memory now has a family working to honor it. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with genuine effort, genuine presence, genuine understanding of what was lost and what could have been. That's not the ending Thomas hoped for when he wrote his will, but it's also not the worst possible outcome. It's something in between. between, something messy and real and human, something worth fighting for. Have you ever had to decide whether to give someone a second chance after they let you down in the worst possible way? What helped you make that decision? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything. Thank you for being here with me through this story.